Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh stop of the Great Canadian Farm Tour. My name is Colleen. I'm a teacher working for Agriculture in the Classroom Canada, and I'm so excited to be going on all of these virtual farm tours with you. Today, we are in Alberta, where we will be visiting a sugar beet farm. We're going to learn all about sugar beets, about what they are and how they grow, and so much more. This March is the 11th anniversary of Canadian Agriculture Literacy Month, and what better way to celebrate than to go on 11 virtual farm tours across Canada. I have a few reminders for everyone before we get started. First things first, I would love to see where you are all joining us from today, so please put this in the live chat. Also, as a reminder, you can write any questions that you have throughout the tour in this chat as well, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can throughout the tour. Don't forget that all of our live tours are being recorded, so if there's any that you missed in the past, you can always go back and watch them. Okay, let's see where some of you are joining us from today. We have a grade 3-4 class from Newfoundland on their 6th tour. A grade 3 class from New Brunswick, welcome. Lots of schools from Alberta are here. Saskatchewan, some grade 2s are looking forward to learning about sugar beets. I am too. Manitoba. We have a homeschool from Halifax. Another grade 3 class from Manitoba. And so many more. So thank you all for joining us from all across Canada. It's so exciting to see so many provinces joining us here today. Agriculture in the Classroom Canada is excited to be hosting this tour in partnership with our provincial member, Ag for Life from Alberta. I would like to now introduce my co-host for this tour. Her name is Helena, and she's Ag for Life's youth editor. Welcome, Helena.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. It's really exciting to see so many people from so many different provinces. I'm speaking to you today from here in Alberta. And before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge that we are speaking to you today from Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation and Stoney Nakoda First Nation. This territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We would like to acknowledge that we live, work, play, and farm on these traditional lands.
Thank you, Helena. So there are many diverse types of farms in Alberta, and today we will be visiting a sugar beet farm. These types of farms are important because sugar beets produce sucrose, which is sugar that we use to make all of our sweet treats with, and many other products that we're going to learn more about today.
And I'm so excited to get to introduce you to our sugar beet farmer and sugar beet expert, Gary. Welcome, Gary.
Hello, everybody. Great to have you all with us here today.
So Gary farms with his wife, Elizabeth, and children, Rebecca, Matt, Ben, and Steve on an irrigation farm near Lethbridge in southern Alberta. Their farm is almost 100 years old. Gary himself has farmed here for 36 years, and the family has been growing sugar beets for over 70 years. Thanks for joining us today, Gary.
Thanks.
So we cannot wait to learn more about your farm today and more about sugar beets, Gary. But before we begin, I just want to remind our participants of some of the learning materials that go along with the Great Canadian Farm Tour. So first, we hope you have your Great Canadian Farm Tour activity book in front of you so that you're ready to record the answers to the brain break questions. So throughout the tours, there's going to be 3 video learning breaks. The first 2 are these brain breaks where we're going to learn some fun facts about sugar beets. And the last one is a job spotlight. So there's many exciting careers in agriculture. And during this spotlight, we're going to learn about one of them. The last page of the activity book is the Great Canadian Farm Tour passport. So make sure you bring your passport along with you on the tour so that you can record the mystery word that's going to be appearing in the top left corner of the screen at some point during the tour. And you can also add this word to the mystery sentence at the bottom of the passport. Lastly, what's an event with Agriculture in the Classroom Canada without a contest? We've already received some amazing entries, as you can see up here, to our contest. Just a reminder to teachers, all you have to do to enter is upload a photo of your class participating in the Great Canadian Farm Tour to social media, and make sure you use the hashtag GCFT22 contest for a chance to win a prize pack for your classroom. Okay, let's start the tour.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. So Gary, first question, why aren't we out in your fields right now, real time, looking at sugar beets?
Well, Helena, thanks for asking. As you can see, there's still snow on the ground here in Alberta, and it's very cold. And sugar beets we actually check the temperature periodically of the soil, and it needs to be at least 10 degrees Celsius before we can plant the beets, because they're very susceptible as seedlings to cold weather. So we have to conduct this survey or tour inside today. And, I'm very excited to talk about sugar beets. It's a passion of mine, and I'm very proud of our farm. So, we'll teach you guys something about sugar beets today.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because I'm looking out my window right now and it's very sunny, but I know it's still pretty cold, especially in the ground. So thankfully, we have some pre-recorded video so we can see sugar beets in action and learn how they grow. So let's watch our first video now.
You like candy, cake, cookies, and pop, then you'll definitely like sugar beets too. After all, that's what gives each one of those items their sweet taste. But what exactly is a sugar beet? A sugar beet is a root plant that grows underground, just like a carrot. Only sugar beets are much, much bigger. Their average weight can be up to 5 pounds, which is how heavy a printer or a blender is. Sugar beets are grown in 2 provinces in Canada, Alberta and Ontario. In Alberta, sugar beets are grown across 28,000 acres. Now, if you're not sure how big an acre is, that would be the same as having 15,909 football fields filled with sugar beets. Alberta began growing sugar beets over 100 years ago in 1902. Every year after they're harvested, the beets get turned into refined sugar, molasses, and beet pulp. The sugar gets used in your favorite snacks and pops. The molasses gets used in drinks and livestock feed. And the beet pulp gets fed to cattle. But before any of that can happen, the beets have to be planted in the ground. Sugar beets start off as small, star-shaped seed. Through a special process, they will become rounded and then treated with a blue coating. This coating protects the seeds from pests as it goes into the soil, almost like a little jacket. Once the seed sprouts, it no longer needs its protection and the blue jacket disintegrates. In order to get the seed into the ground, farmers attach a special kind of planter behind their tractor. This equipment can be carefully adjusted for depth and spacing, which makes sure the seeds aren't too close together or too deep into the ground. Sugar beets are planted in April, which makes them the first crop seeded.
Wow, I sure learned a lot from that video. Gary, can you explain a bit more about the blue jacket that's on the seeds? What type of pest does it help protect the seeds from?
I have to put on my farmer hat now. Okay, the jacket that goes on the seed protects mainly 2 different pests that we have. Below ground, it's a little worm called a wireworm. It's about a centimeter long, and it attaches into the roots once the beet has been germinated, the seed, and it can suck all the nutrients out of the roots, and it'll kill the beet. So that's one pest that it controls. And the other is above ground, and it's called a flea beetle. And a flea beetle attacks the leaves, and it's just the size of the pinhead on top. And it's a little black guy, and he's really fast, but he'll land on there, and he can chew the leaves right off a whole field of beets if you let it. So that's the other pest that it controls.
Okay, so it helps protect the beets against insects.
Yes.
All right, I have another question for you. So you said that sugar beets are usually like the first crop that you would plant. What other types of crops are planted in Alberta? What else grows there?
Well, down in southern Alberta, we're on irrigation, and we have fairly high heat units, so we can grow a variety of crops. On my farm, I'll grow hard red spring wheat, which is makes bread, and I'll grow barley. I grow dry beans and dry peas for edible market. And if I'm feeling really adventurous, I'll grow corn and sometimes potatoes. So those are my main crops on my farm, and a little bit of hay for my cows.
Wow, so lots of crops can grow in Alberta. Okay, so I have lots of questions for Gary, and I'm sure all of you do too. So just as a reminder, you can put these in the live chat and we'll get to them soon. Right now, we're going to jump into our first brain break, so make sure you have your activity book ready so you can record the correct answer to the brain break question.
Brain break. Did you know? Sugar beets and sugar cane are the two main crops that produce sugar around the world. Sugar beets can be grown in Canada, but sugar cane can only grow in tropical countries where it is really hot. Thanks for learning with us.
Wow, it's pretty incredible that we have this option here in Alberta to produce our own sugar, because as the video said, sugarcane needs tropical temperatures, and as we all know, here in Canada, it can get pretty darn chilly. So yeah, sugar beets are an incredible resource in that way. So Gary, once the seeds are planted, what do you have to do to help grow the sugar beets and take care of them?
Well, we walk the fields regularly every week. We probe the soil for moisture, and it's expensive to water and run irrigation equipment. So we're very conscious about how much water we put on, and we put just the right amount on. And a sugar beet will take approximately 20 inches of precipitation in a year, whether that's rainfall or applied with our center pivots. And like I say, we probe every week, and then we add probably 1 to 2 inches of water a week, depending on the time of year. We also scout for weeds and any kind of diseases, but we're mandated a 4-year rotation on our beets. So we have 3 other crops in between the sugar beets, and so we don't have very much diseases at all. So we don't have to use many chemicals there, and just the spraying of the beets probably once to twice a year to kill any weeds that are there.
Right. So it's a lot of monitoring and checking up on the beets to just see what they need and then provide them with whatever they need to grow big and strong and sweet. So we have a video actually that'll help us learn more about irrigation and see how the beets are being harvested. So let's go ahead and watch that now.
Remember how sugar beets were the first crop to be seeded? They're also the last plant to be harvested. Sugar beets will spend all summer growing and soaking up the Alberta sun and drinking lots of water. But because southern Alberta is so hot and dry, farmers can't rely on the weather for enough rain. Instead, they use pivots to make sure their crops get enough moisture. A pivot is an irrigation system that travels across the field in a big circle, delivering water to the plants. Farmers can carefully calculate the rate and speed that pivot travels to make sure the sugar beets get the right amount of water. Then, once September rolls around, harvest begins. There are 200 sugar beet farmers in southern Alberta, but only a small portion will begin harvesting their beets in the beginning of September. This is because the factory has to gear back up into production, so they take just enough beets to get everything back to work. Then, after a few weeks, main harvest will begin. During this time, over 900,000 tons of sugar beets will be dug out of the ground. To harvest sugar beets, farmers first chop the leaves and tops off using a defoliator. The leaves will stay in the field and break down over the winter, helping to return extra nutrients to the soil. After defoliation, a digger is used to harvest the beets from the ground. It has multiple sets of round blades that swivel in the dirt on an angle. Once they reach the sugar beet, the beets get pinched between the two blades and is picked out of the ground. It then gets passed into the body of the digger and travels through a large circular conveyor. From there, the beets will get loaded into a truck, and that truck will bring them to the piling grounds. This is the site where the beets are kept for the winter. At the grounds, the beets will get unloaded into massive piles, hundreds of feet long. The sugar beets are stored like this until they are able to be processed at the factory.
Okay, very cool. I never knew sugar beets were harvested this way, how they're first defoliated or their leaves are taken off and then they're dug up. So Gary, were sugar beets always harvested this way?
No, actually, they were very harvested very different. When I said we were 70 years ago that we started growing beets on our farm, this was the main implement that we used. It's called a sugar beet knife. And the beets would be pulled out of the ground, and then the farmer would come along, stab the beet, lift it up, and chop the leaves off of it. So everything was done by hand. So just for interest, there's over 6 million sugar beets in a circle of field, and there's like 6 million. So can you imagine using that knife, picking up 6 million beets and chopping the leaves on and throwing them on a wagon and taking them to the piling grounds? I might not be a farmer anymore if I still had to do that.
Oh, wow. We're really lucky for technology to advance that for us.
Yes.
Okay, we have some questions here from the chat. So Callie wants to know what the difference is between a sugar beet and a regular beet.
Well, a regular beet is usually red. I think they're in the same family, but a sugar beet it's a white beet inside, and it's basically bred for sugar content. So, a red beet in your garden will not be as sweet, and that's probably the big difference in size as well. Your red beet is a lot smaller, and a sugar beet can be up to 5 pounds in size.
Okay, so lots of differences.
We have another question here. How long does it take for a sugar beet to grow?
That's a great question. A sugar beet is actually a biennial, so it will grow for 2 years if you let it, and then it'll go to seed. But what we do is we start in April, and we'll plant the beets, and we'll harvest them starting in October. So that's usually the normal case around here. In other parts of the world, they grow a lot longer, and they get a lot more tons. But we're constrained by winter time. We don't want to be digging much past the end of October, or we probably won't get the beets out.
Interesting. So they're one of the first crops that are planted, and also probably one of the later ones to be harvested then.
Yeah.
So a long growing season. Yeah.
Yes, and they're very hard to get going. They're very delicate plant and a small little cotyledon. But once they get past a certain stage, I don't think you can kill a sugar beet. They're pretty hardy after that, and they do well here in southern Alberta.
Okay, and just so our students know, a cotyledon, Gary, that's the first leaves that come out of the ground, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have been a little better on that.
That's okay. We just want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question. So can you cook and eat a sugar beet?
We actually have a fellow that comes out from town, and he'll take a few beets at harvest time. He takes them home, scrapes them all off, slices them up, and fries them in butter, and he says there's nothing better than that. Anything that's fried in butter is really good, and a sugar beet's one of those items.
Okay, so there we have it. Okay, it's time for our second brain break now, so make sure you record the correct answer in your activity book.
Brain break. Did you know Rogers Sugar Factory in Alberta is the only place in Canada that turns sugar beets into sugar? All Canadian sugar has the number 22 at the beginning of the black number code on the front of the sugar bag. Thanks for learning with us.
Okay, so the next time you go shopping for sugar in your grocery store, you can either look for the Rogers label on the bag or that number 22 in the number code will let you know that you're buying Canadian sugar. What's that? Is that today's mystery word? So today's word is tot, and today we're in Alberta, so in your passport, you're going to write the word tot beside the province of Alberta.
So speaking of mystery words, there are so many words in agriculture that might feel big or unfamiliar, like GMO and sustainability. So let's watch this next video to find out why these words come up a lot, especially when we're talking about sugar beets.
Sugar beets have seen tons of changes over the years, and luckily, these changes have been super helpful to farmers. You see, when the sugar beets were first grown in Alberta, there was only one kind of seed available, a multi-germ seed. This means that for every one seed planted, 5 or 6 sugar beets would grow from it. Now that might sound great, but in reality, it wasn't good at all. Sugar beets need to be spaced out evenly so that they have room to grow. So how did farmers fix this problem? They would walk up and down the fields using a hoe to chop up the extra sugar beets. They would do this until there was only one plant every 6 inches. But this was no easy task. Every single field is 160 acres, which is the same size as 40 city blocks. Beet seeds are now planted in rows 18 to 24 inches apart. If 4 plants have to be hoed out every 6 inches, then that means over 27 million plants would have to be chopped from every field. Could you imagine walking down a field all day long in the hot sun, swinging a hoe back and forth? But finally, in 1957, a new type of seed became available. With monogerm, only one plant grew from each seed. So now farmers didn't have to thin the crop out anymore. But that didn't mean the hoeing days were over. No, farmers still had to spray the crops to kill the weeds. But at that time, the only chemicals they had were extremely expensive and extremely strong. In fact, they were so strong that they would hurt the beets too, and cause leaves to yellow or wither. So the farmers would spray small amounts, trying not to damage their crop. But that meant some weeds would still escape. So now, farmers would still have to hoe the fields. Only this time, they'd be chopping up all the weeds. Finally, in 2005, a genetically modified sugar beet variety became available. What made these sugar beets different is that the seed had been genetically engineered through the use of biotechnology to allow the plant to be resistant to glyphosate, which is a common and safer herbicide. That means farmers can spray glyphosate on their crops and it won't hurt the sugar beets at all. The plant continues to grow strong and healthy while the weeds die. And farmers don't have to spray as much anymore. With the old method, they would have to spray their crop 4 times every year. But with the genetically modified seed, they only need to spray 1 to 2 times a year. This new seed helps farmers be more sustainable. They are now able to use safer chemicals with lower toxicity rates, less fuel, and less labor. I think it's safe to say that those days of hoeing sugar beet fields won't be missed.
Wow, it's really amazing how much technology and science has changed the face of farming, because it sounds like it made crops more productive and made a lot less work for farmers, which, is always a good thing. So I think we have time for a question from the chat. Right, Maddie would like to know, how do you get the sugar from the sugar beets and into pop and stuff?
Well, you saw pictures earlier of the factory in Tabor, and those beets will get loaded into a conveyor that goes into the factory. The beets are washed, the rocks are taken out, and then they're sliced up by a slicer, and it goes into a diffusing tower. And they look like shoestring potato chips at that time. And they're basically squeezed out, and you have the juice from the beet, and it's evaporated, and you spin it and you get the sugar out of it, and the molasses goes a different way, and then it's dried and it's packaged, and then it goes to Coca-Cola or bakeries or a whole different array of areas, and that's what they use when they make their pop and your cakes and your cookies and every other good thing.
That's awesome.
Gary, you're just frozen, so we're going to pull you out of the stream really quick and bring you back in, and that should fix it.
Okay.
There we go. And now we have time for another question. So Lily wants to know if sugar beets are considered a fruit or a vegetable.
Gee.
Wait, what's the question?
A fruit or a vegetable? I get stumped on these every now and then, but I would think it's a vegetable. A fruit usually has seeds inside. So yes, it would be a vegetable.
Perfect. Okay, we have time for 2 more questions here.
Awesome. So Holly asks, are there different kinds of sugar beets?
There'd be different varieties, but a sugar beet is basically a sugar beet. It's one family, and yeah, but there's numerous companies that produce different seed. So for your area, it's specific to your area and the needs for the farmer.
All right.
Okay, and we have some questions here about planting. So how far down do you have to put the seeds when you're planting them in the ground?
Okay, if you remember the planter that shows there, we're only going like 3/4 of an inch in the ground, because the seed, it's such a small seed that it doesn't have the pushing power to get up, and you got to be very careful with crusting, because the beet seed will just go up and then turn around and go back down. And so we like to seed when water's available, so that we can seed very shallow and then water the beets up with 1/4 of an inch a circle, just to get them going.
Okay, and when you say crusting, you mean the ground, it gets too hard for the beets to go through, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of different soil types in southern Alberta, from very sandy to heavy clay, and I'm on a heavy clay soil. So if we get a pounding rain, I can have 1/2 inch crust on top of the beets, and that's when you need to quickly water them to break up the crust so the beets can come out.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Gary. So now we're going to jump into our job spotlight and learn about an exciting career in agriculture.
Job Spotlight, powered by Think Ag.
Agronomists are like doctors or veterinarians, but for plants. What do agronomists do? I look at the crops in farmers' fields and make sure they are healthy. I help fix problems I might see in a field, for example, weeds, diseases, or harmful insects. I stay up to date with the latest research and give this information to farmers.
Okay, so agronomists are important in helping their farmers to make sure their plants stay healthy. I see you changed your hat again, Gary.
I have my agronomist hat on now, yes.
So you use agronomists on your farm?
Yes, I do. Actually, my wife and myself are both graduates from university in UBC in Alberta, and we both have agriculture degrees. And my daughter followed in my footsteps, went to University of Alberta and got her ag degree. And she is actually a field person with Rogers Sugar, and she checks fields, and she actually checks mine quite often. And so does Elizabeth, and they're a lot smarter than I am, so I let them go.
All right, we love to see that. Lots of women working on the farm too.
Yes.
Awesome. So we've come to the last section of our farm tour. We get to ask Gary questions from students all across Canada. So let's get started. So Greystone Heights grade 4-5 students want to know if any sugar beets get missed in the field during the harvesting process.
Unfortunately, yes. We try to minimize that. But when you have those big machines and they're pulling 6 to 12 rows at a time, the odd beet falls out. And when you have that many beets coming into the hopper of the harvester and going into a truck, if the harvester operator is not paying attention, which is me, you can throw a lot of beets over the side. We try to pick them up, but on a big fields, it's hard to pick up all the beets. But yes, Short answer is yes, quite a few beets get left behind.
Right, but that's okay if they get left behind, right? Because they disintegrate in the soil and help put nutrients there.
Yes, they do. They're very high in nutrient value. We found out a couple of years ago we had to leave a whole farm because they got frozen in, and we chopped them up the next year, and we had very nice wheat following that. We'd rather have dug the beets, but that's what happens sometimes.
Right.
Right. Wade would like to know, why are sugar beets not grown in Manitoba or Saskatchewan?
Oh, that's a great question. Manitoba used to have a facility and a factory in Winnipeg, and they grew quite a few beets in the Red River Valley. When they expanded Tabor plant, they closed down Manitoba, which is very sad in my estimation. And they were very good sugar beet growers in Manitoba. Saskatchewan, there was never a plant there. They're a lot drier than Manitoba, and there was never a plant set up there. But now they have irrigation along the Diefenbaker Lake, which would be suitable for growing beets again. But yeah, it's just a matter of where the factory decided to build. We had three built in Alberta, southern Alberta, and it's down to one now. So
interesting. So it's possible. It just is kind of a matter of chance, and also Alberta's just happens to be a good spot for it.
yeah, the conditions are right in southern Alberta, and we would love to see beets growing across Canada because we only produce 8% of the sugar used in Canada in southern Alberta. So, why can't we grow 90% of the sugar? So there are areas that can grow it, and we'd love to see it happen in expansion.
Okay, our next question here from Autumn. So Autumn would like to know, how many people work on your farm to harvest the sugar beets?
Okay, I've got one son, Benny, that he's full time with me, and he's our everything man at harvest time. He digs, he defoliates, he runs a truck. I'm there, and then we hire two more drivers, and we also hire two trucks with drivers. So yeah, and we harvest around 200 acres of beets. So we run about 6, 7 people. I try to get my wife in the defoliator, but she refuses to get in there.
Okay,
But,
so lots of hands on deck, it sounds
lots
like.
of hand. The harvest is very intensive, and it's usually about 10 days to 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Greystone Heights grade 4 to 5 students want to know, how many sugar beets are needed to produce a cup of sugar?
Oh, I'll have to ask a friend here. How many sugar beets to make a cup of sugar?
Oh, 5. About 5.
About 5 sugar beets to make a cup of sugar.
And sugar beets, they're big. They're not like your regular garden beets. So
no, they're about
yeah,
at least 5 times bigger than a garden beet. If you have a successful crop.
Okay, so Chase here wants to know if animals try to eat the sugar beets.
Well, I have some land just on the river, off the river, and last year I counted 25 deer at harvest time, and they like to come and nibble. They don't eat the leaves; they actually eat the crown of the beet. So they must like a sweet treat as well. And I know when we've had trouble at the factory and they've discarded beets, those beets actually go to feedlots and they're chopped up and they're fed to cattle. So yeah, it makes a very good feed stock.
Okay, and we learned that insects eat them, so some animals like them too, I guess.
Oh, yes.
Jolene asks, how long has Farmer Gary been farming sugar beets? How old was he when he started?
When I actually took over the farm is 36 years ago, but I mean, right from 5 years of age, I was out in the field either cultivating beets or seeding beets or doing something with beets. So I've been at it here probably just about 55 years. When I was a little guy, I used to hoe beets, and that's how I bought my bicycle and any other goodies that I wanted. I had to work for it. So I've always been involved in sugar beets.
Wow, yeah, always been in the world of sugar beets. That's amazing.
Okay, so Copper here wants to know, how much is one sugar beet worth? Might be a
Not a
hard
whole lot. I'm
question.
sorry. That's why it's not worth walking around the field picking them all up. So
Yeah. So if
yeah,
you lose a couple, that's okay.
yeah.
Dash would like to know how long it takes to get all the sugar beets harvested.
Okay, well, it all depends for different guys. We have a mini harvest at the start of the show there. It showed where they take so many tons in, and every farmer's got a different plan at harvest time. So some guys will dig all their beets in mini harvest. It's very fast because there's no lineups, and then you're looking at probably 10 days to 2 weeks for full harvest to get your crop off if the weather holds. And around here, we can get snow, rain, just about anything. And most of the times we can harvest through snow. Where we have trouble is when the beets freeze. And the 2 years prior, we had a really bad frost that really got into the beets. But yeah, I would say 2 weeks is probably the norm for most guys to get their crop off.
Right. And you have a lot of land you're growing on, right? So it makes sense that it would take some time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, our next question here. What farm jobs do you do in the winter when there is snow on the ground?
Well, I used to have cows, but now my daughter took over the herd. But she holidays, and I still have to check cows every now and then. And I don't like cows. I like to say I'm in the twilight of my career. I'm over 60 now, and I try not to do a whole lot in the winter time.
That's
But yeah, I have a Benny that maintains equipment in the shop in the wintertime, so that's his job now.
Yep, so you have to make sure the equipment will be all good to go for the spring when you're ready to plant.
Yeah, we're pretty close to ready already now. So uh, just got to get warmed up, and we're all getting itchy feet to get going.
Yeah, I guess next month you'll start planting.
Yep. So
Awesome. Alexa asks, would a sugar beet have any taste if you just bit into it?
actually, they're very tasty. If I'm bored out in the field and the trucks aren't coming back at harvest, I'll go out and I'll pull a beet and I'll cut it up and chew on it. It's texture of a carrot, I would think, but much sweeter. So, yeah, as long as you don't get dirt on it, then it's not as tasty as need be. But no, we had a farm tour out here last year, and a girl came from Edmonton, and that was her big excitement was to cut into a beet and taste a beet, and she was quite impressed. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, Gary, this will be our last question of the day. So what is your favorite part of your job?
Oh, I love my life as a farmer. I I like being outdoors. I like to plant a crop, grow it, watch it be harvested, and whatever you put in is what you get out, and it's the freedom. Like I make my own decisions. Well, if my wife doesn't correct me on things, but for the most part, I'm free to do what I want, and I love it. I love the life, and yeah, and I've got two kids that want to continue it, and that's the most important thing for me is to see the next generation go.
Oh, that's so exciting. It's so nice to hear that you love your job and that your kids are interested in it as well. Okay, so we've come to the end of our Q&A period. Sorry if we did not get to everyone's questions. We saw so many amazing ones coming through in the chat. So yeah, just keep an eye out, teachers. We're going to be sending out a follow-up resource with answers to questions that we couldn't get to during the live tours.
And Gary, I just want to thank you for joining us today. We learned so much. I learned so much, and I imagine everyone else did, about sugar beets and your life as a sugar beet farmer. So thank you so much for showing us around and guiding us on this journey.
Oh, anytime. I love this part of my job here as a president of the Beet Growers. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Gary. And I would like to thank you, Helena, for being my co-host today and bringing me to Alberta and yeah, joining me on this fun journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Okay, and lastly, I want to thank all of you for joining us on our 7th stop of the Great Canadian Farm Tour. Our next tour is tomorrow. We're going to be heading to a beef farm in Saskatchewan, so I can't wait to take you all there. As a final reminder, do not forget to enter our social media contest, teachers. We've already received so many amazing entries. We love seeing you participating in the Great Canadian Farm Tour. And we hope that you're using your activity books and your passports. And if you missed today's mystery word, we'll put it up on the screen one more time. So today's word is taught. And don't forget that all of the live tours are being recorded, so you can watch them after any future tours. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow in Saskatchewan, where we will be learning all about beef.